Part 2 of Self-Hating Jews. We need to talk about Ilan Pappe. You might not think that you know who he is, but trust me that you do.
I'm not a self-hating Jew, I'm not a self-hating anti-Semite, and none of you are anti-Semites if you think that Zionism has a very strong colonialist ideology in it. And challenging it is very much like challenging apartheid in South Africa.
Ilan Pappe is a historian. You might not be familiar with his books, but you're definitely going to be familiar with concepts and the terms that he's coined in his books that have been prevalent throughout all of the media, throughout all of the Israel hatred that's been going on for really a really long time, but specifically in the past couple months since October 7th. You might be familiar with these concepts and titles: the biggest prison on earth, open air prison, the boycott will work. This is about the BDS movement. The ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Ethnic cleansing. That one has become so prevalent that even Abbas is starting to use it. These are some of his articles. The 48 Nakba and the Zionist quest for its completion. He's also the one behind all of this Tantora stuff. This one is just the worst. And by the way, this is for the Electric Intifada. Destruction of Alaska, no conspiracy theory. He's also the one that's been pushing this idea of occupation. In my mind, Ilan Pappe, he's the king of the traitors. But I want to give you a little background on him. Ilan Pappe, along with Benny Morris, who I'm going to be talking about quite a lot, are part of a group called the New Historians. The New Historians arose at a time back in the 80s when the official archives of the Israeli government were released, and it caused for some revision in how the history of Israel was being taught. However, before we get into that, I think it's important for us to examine how these two people, colleagues and historians from the same period of time, see the role of history as told by historians. This is from Ilan Pappe in his own words, from Le Soir magazine in France. The struggle is about ideology, not about the facts. Who knows what facts are? We try to convince as many people as we can that our interpretation of the facts is the correct one, and we do it because of ideological reasons, not because we are truth seekers. So what do we do with a historian that says outright that he's not a truth seeker? Can we still call him a historian? I don't think so. This is what Benny Morris has to say about what kind of truth seeker he is.
The vast majority of Israeli historians and historians of Israel, I think, more or less accept my description of what happened. And I think most, except Arab historians or so-called historians, would accept that there was no master plan in what happened to the Palestinians who were displaced, and there was no systematic implementation of a plan. Exceptions to this are Ilan Pappe, who did write a book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, recently published. Essentially, it's one big lie, in my view. Its sources are suspect, incorrect, distorted, invented in part. So that's the nature of Pappe's modus operandi in the book throughout. On everything, you cannot rely on one sentence in that book, or any quote.
And speaking of Benny Morris, this is a clip of how he describes his relationship with history.
My view was that history should serve, historical writing should serve no purpose other than simply to illuminate the past, to try and get the story right, to describe it as accurately as possible, and let the reader judge. Historians should simply write what the documents tell him happened. Pappe was a mild anti-Zionist, say, down to the 1990s, and became a very firm anti-Zionist, in fact a propagandist, I would say, in terms of his writing. It's not serious history.
The problem is that he's so devoted to defending his ideology that he's willing to sacrifice facts in order to do so. I'm going to give you examples of what I would consider sloppy and honestly destructive scholarship. In his book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, he reports on a letter that was written in 1937 by Ben Gurion. The way that he writes it, he says that Ben Gurion says, "We must expel the Arabs and take their place." The real text from Ben Gurion's letter is quite the opposite. What he wrote is, "We do not want and do not need to expel the Arabs and take their place." And the problem with this, besides the fact that it's just an outright lie, is that he has built the entire scholarship of his book based on this. Let's let him do a little speaking in his own words.
I blame Israel for the current war, because we should never forget the context in which the Hamas attack happened. And that is the siege on Gaza that began in 2006. So in terms of what caused this or any previous cycle of violence, one has to go to the source of the violence. And the source of the violence is occupation and colonization.
And if you think he's just talking about apartheid in the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank, he's not. Let's just listen to him straight up lie right now about Israelis that are living in Jerusalem and the rest of Israel.
when we talk about full apartheid, either in Jerusalem or in Palestine, it is full not only in the way that it is exercised daily, namely different roads for people, different rights of prayer, and different distribution of resources, and of course, ethnically cleansing the Palestinian community in the greater Jerusalem area, and so on. This is one part of the full apartheid. The other one is the potential that the regime has at any given moment to totally disregard the basic civil rights and human rights of any Palestinian in the greater Jerusalem area. This and also inside Israel, also even inside Israel.
And you don't even have to be like a scholar or a historian or live in Israel. You just have to go there for a few hours to see that this is straight up false. So even though it doesn't take very much to knock down this preposterous accusation, I feel like we need to bring in our own expert just because so many other people seem to believe this. Sophia, would you like to add anything?
I'm a Muslim Arab growing up in Israel. I'm a mother of two, and I have a master's from Stanford University. I was born to a Muslim family in Israel. My mom is a single mom. I have 8 siblings. We were supported by the welfare in Israel, by the welfare system, because otherwise my mom would not be able to provide. Israel is a very beautiful and strong multi-ethnic democracy. Around 20% of the population are Arab Muslims, like myself. The Arab citizens of Israel receive equal rights. They get welfare, they get education, they get healthcare, they get all the rights, the protection, anything that a Jewish citizen would get. I was discovered by a fashion photographer, but I knew that this is a choice of no return. I cannot step my foot in the village if I'm a model. I travel to Europe for work and I spend a lot of my time in Tel Aviv. My uncle, he threatened to cut off my head for dishonoring the family. And he obviously could not do that because we live in Israel and Israel protects women. I hear a lot of people calling Israel an apartheid state. Maybe let's start with explaining what is an apartheid. It's a discrimination based on race. Arabs in Israel, who constitute 20% of the Israeli population, they're equal citizens. They're getting all the rights from Israel. They have education, healthcare, welfare, full rights, full protection. They're equal citizens for everything. Where's the apartheid?
Let's watch him assert that Hamas is not a terrorist organization and claiming that he's the expert on Hamas.
I'm one of the world experts on Hamas. And nobody consulted me in the British government before they took that decision. It was a directive from Israel to include Hamas in the list of terrorist organizations. Hamas is part of the Palestinian liberation movement. Sometimes liberation movements do use terror, do use violence in their struggle for liberation. But also the colonialist states and also Israel is using terror. So nobody can take the high moral ground on terrorism here. Defining it as a terrorist organization means that it just uses terror for the sake of terror. No, it is part of the Palestinian attempt to change a reality of colonization.
And so what is the problem here with this type of propaganda? Because he is an Israeli historian, he and his work have been given a credibility that has gone off like wildfire. And his books are in the bookshelves of every anti-Semite and every neo-Nazi out there. And as you can see, it is studied with a biblical-like scholarship on all of the social medias, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. And it's used as ammunition against the Jewish people. Look at the way that he's praised. What's really happening here? He's not a particularly good historian. He's not a particularly good writer. I will say he is somewhat well-spoken, but the only thing of merit, the only thing that holds any water is that he's willing to speak out against Jews and against Israel. And for this, he's been elevated to the status of king. Who could ever withstand that seductive draw? And so just so you know, while other people are using these terms, when we hear ethnic cleansing, apartheid, colonial expansionists, open air prison, that they're all stemming back to the root of this unscrupulous man, a liar, a propagandist. People may not think that they know him, but he has become the king of the traitors.